Well, thank you, and thank you to the witnesses for being here today. My first question is going to be to Mr. Thurlow. You talked about the importance of the watch list that's being put together here. And that watch list, this is important legislation. We've been looking at this for quite some time since it was put on our plate here in Parliament, and I can assure you we have numerous interveners trying to say we need to meet with you to go over this. And I know we're parsing that in this committee as far as the number of people that can get this. And we're parliamentarians. You know this, Mr. Thurlow. We don't know the chemistry the way you do. We don't know how this is going to interact with all the biological factors the way you do. We're all drinking from a fire hose here as far as the changes we need to make in order to get good legislation for Canadians. So with that preamble, we're looking at trying to do a deep dive on what we need to do here. It's legislation that's been designed over a number of years with the input of experts, of people that are actually involved in this business, like your company and your industry association. And I would ask that there have been many changes to this along the way. Would you suggest that some of those changes in the other place have been less than constructive? And if so, what damage in the to the chemical industry management in Canada has been done by potential amendments that happen on the way here, and how would we address that?
So there's a lot in that question, and I thank you very much for it. And Mr. Chair, I implore on you not to give me homework the way that the chair of the Senate committee did. And in the homework assignment that he gave me, he asked us to research every other jurisdiction in the world to find a watch list, and we couldn't. So this asks the question about why we need this watch list. Now, as it has been explained to us, the watch list is a signal to industry to avoid the use of certain chemistries after a risk assessment has been completed and has been deemed to be found not eligible to be added to Schedule 1. It is a tool to send a signal to industry to avoid the use of these substances. As I said in my opening remarks, if government wants to do that, a significant new activity notice does that job admirably. If you want to send a signal to industry to tell them to stop using something, a stop sign works. And that's what a SNAC is. We need to have permission after a SNAC is put in place to increase our use of a substance or to change the use of that substance. Now, I'm not going to say we have to delete the watch list, although I would like you to delete the watch list. At the very least, can we have an off-ramp so that if the hazard profile of a substance changes because of new scientific evidence, a petitioner, a citizen, a company can go to the minister and say, we have this new information, please remove the substance from the watch list. So that's part of the answer to your question. Now, on the Senate, I mean, what the Senate did to the watch list was it said, well, we'll take it off the watch list if we add a substance to Schedule 1. Well, that's a little bit of a coy move because they've then decided that the substance has to be managed, so there's no point in it being on the watch list anymore. It's no longer sending that signal to industry. So an amendment on the other side of the ledger that allows a substance to get out of this proverbial parking lot, or I call it the defamation list, where it is proven in the future that the hazard profile that would end up on the watch list is reduced, would be very much appreciated.
Thank you for that. I've gone through the background on the bill, and there's some clauses that I'd like your input on here. Clause 53 adds new sections 317.1, 317.2 to list circumstances under which the Minister of the Environment may disclose the explicit chemical or biological name of a substance or the explicit biological name of a living organism, even if a request for confidentiality has been made. These include circumstances where, and it lists them. Is this at all a deterrent to business in your industry if confidentiality is going to be breached, potentially without even notification from the minister to the company in question? Is that something that exists only in Canada, and will it be a deterrent to business evolving in Canada?
So, as originally drafted, Bill S-5 has changes to the confidential business information provisions of CEPA. But those changes are changes that, provided the adequate notice is provided to the owners of that information and they have a right of reply, they're acceptable. Okay? There are other amendments that have been circulating about mandatory disclosures, about a public disclosure in advance of an approval. Those are the types of amendments that will really stop innovation. Those are the type of amendments that will not necessarily provide the public with any new useful information, but will absolutely provide our competitors with the useful information as we disclose this confidential business information. So I would warn the committee against those types of changes.
And let me go further, because there's a provision in here where the Minister of Health may disclose confidential business information to other government departments or other governments, international governments, I'm presuming, for the purpose of managing an environmental risk or to protect the environment. This disclosure may take place without notice to or the consent of the person to whose affairs the information relates. Is that going to cause an international problem for your company if they actually start doing their innovation and development here in Canada?
So there's two ways of answering your question, and I'm going to use the way that makes the departments look good first, which is in the past, when there have been these questions about who holds confidential business information, they have bent over backwards to find the owners of that information to ensure that before they make a public disclosure of any kind, that the people who own that information have the opportunity to put up their hand and say, wait a second, this is or is not a good idea. This is still something that we believe to be that it's important to the business confidentiality of our company. How this particular clause operates in the future is going to depend on as much on our OECD partners and how they hold that information and how their access laws are designed. Our access to information laws are designed on a trilogy of acts, and when an access request is made for anyone's information, and there is a question about that confidential business information, the onus is on industry to prove to the government that they shouldn't disclose it if the government plans on disclosing it through an access to information request. And I've filled out thousands of those requests and replies, and I believe the government does a very good job at safeguarding that information.
Another technical question here for your response to this committee. Clause 49.1 makes it an offense under CEPA to fail to notify a person to whom a substance or living organism on the domestic substance list is transferred of the responsibility to provide information to the minister. So an offense under CEPA, is that a criminal offense that's being passed on here? And what is the penalty for that criminal offense?
So, unfortunately, that part of the statute will depend a lot on the discretion of the prosecuting lawyer. There is a very wide range of potential offenses under CEPA. It can include jail time.
Thank you very much. I'm going to switch now to Ms. Daniels. Ms. Daniels, thank you very much for your testimony. We have gone through legislation here just recently in this committee. Bill 226 brought forward, it was a private member's bill on environmental racism. There are numerous parts of this bill that we're looking at today that, in my opinion, seem to overlap about the consideration of the effect on vulnerable populations, such as Indigenous populations, much of which you spoke to. Would you think that addressing it in this bill, that is an updating of a very important piece of legislation that government has, and having another bill is going to cause some confusion? Do we need to have two bills, would be my question to you, that address the same environmental racism or consideration of the effects on vulnerable populations?
Hi, thank you for your question. I'm going to defer this question to my colleague Jane, as she was the one who testified on Bill C-226.
Is she here? Okay.
Hello again, Mr. McLean. Yes, I was here on Bill C-226. Thanks, Melissa. I think my colleague with the David Suzuki Foundation, Lisa Gu, actually spoke to this to some degree in the first panel, which is to say that we do believe that these pieces of legislation would be complementary. And I think part of it really is in the implementation and the establishment of how both of these pieces of legislation would be moving forward to address the problems of environmental injustice and environmental racism one of the things that Bill C-226 lays out is very clearly around the problem specifically of environmental racism, where what we see with with SEPA and Bill S-5 is a sort of a broader framework that recognizes that intersection of racism, but in the broader environmental justice framework and around vulnerabilized populations. So I think that these are complementary pieces and are both critical to our understanding. And if I may, we are coming to you as
we're gonna have
an
to stop.
intersection of environment and human health.
Yeah,
And
we're gonna have
so
to
if
stop there.
Thank you.
Thank you, though, for your answer.